and I appreciate the invitation to be here. I often joke I've been married for a few years, so I don't get the opportunity to speak that frequently, at least inside my house. So I appreciate I come in public, and at least I get that chance.
So not true.
No, everybody loves that joke except for my wife, but no, I appreciate the opportunity. I think it's shaping up to be a very informative discussion, and I hope we have time for questions and answers towards the end. Now, I put together a brief PowerPoint. Unfortunately, I forgot to print it out, so if I glance back occasionally, I apologize, but I'll do my best. The topic today is the security wall, or one of the topics. And just as a minor point of clarification, I prefer, or I hope that we'd all refer to it either as the security fence or the security barrier. Only about 4% of that structure is actually the wall. And it was built that way because of sniper bullets. And unfortunately, concrete, or fortunately, however you look at it, concrete is better at stopping bullets than a chain link or wire fence. So at least put that in perspective a little bit. Now, while I disagree with many of the terms and issues my fellow panelists brought up, I think I share everybody's desire to see a peaceful outcome to the region, so we have a region in the Middle East where Jews and Christians and Muslims can work together, can live together, can pray together, can build a vibrant and safe future for everybody. And I'm not going to try to convince you to adopt my views or my positions. And just as a side note, my organization, the David Project, we don't take a political position on any issue other than Israel's right to exist in security as a Jewish state. So I don't want to try to convince you. I'm not going to preach to you in any way. I just want to help try to put things into context and ask that you think critically and think deeply about some of these issues that we're bringing up, and especially think critically about why this fence, why this barrier was built to begin with. Now, after Israel made significant offers to the Palestinian Authority in 2000-2001 at Camp David at Taba that would have helped build a Palestinian state, Palestinian leaders under Yasser Arafat orchestrated this violent uprising, the Second Intifada, that has killed thousands of people, really on both sides, both Israelis and Palestinians. And it was really only after a string of homicide bombings, this is just one that happened this week, if you, I don't know if you pay attention to the news, and also a Palestinian boy with an explosive belt. But again, it was only after a string of these homicide bombings, whether or not it was at the Sparrow Pizzeria in Jerusalem, on buses in Jerusalem, restaurant in Haifa. We have it at Netanya Hotel when Jews were sitting down to celebrate Passover. It was only after a string of these attacks that the Israeli government decided to go ahead and build this barrier. Now, I think we all agree that the first priority of any government, whether or not it's the United States, Canadian, Israeli, whatever country you want to look at, the first priority of any government is to protect the people in their country, is to protect the citizens of that particular country. That's the number one goal, the number one priority for any government anywhere. And so that's what led Israel to go forward with this process. It's not perfect. I understand it causes some hardships, but that was the reason for doing so. And if you look at it again in context, it's probably the most humane way at the time and place to protect the people, to fight terrorism. If we look at how the Russians took care of their problem in Chechnya, where they bombed and killed thousands of people, building a fence, not perfect, much better than any form of attack, military strike that could have taken place. So I asked that everybody look at this fence, not as collective punishment, but really as collective security for the people in Israel. Now, building this fence, let me just bring this up real quickly, is not something that's unique to Israel. It's not something that Israel decided to do, and it's the only place in the world. If we look at what's going on, we see that Saudi Arabia decided to build a fence on its border with Iraq to prevent terrorists. We see that India decided to do the same in Kashmir because of the violence going on in that region between India and Pakistan. So this is not something that Israel decided to do out of the blue, and it's the only place in the world. So if we disagree with it or want to criticize it, let's at least look at it from a world view. And we can also look at the fence the United States is building on the border with Mexico. So whether or not you agree with this fence, whether or not you like it, dislike it, agree with the location of it, disagree with the location of it, it has been successful in accomplishing the main goals, the main reasons for it being built. If we look at the number of Israelis killed from these homicide bombings, from people putting on a vest, going into a pizzeria, going into a cafe, a disco where teenagers were enjoying their Friday night. I'll be done in 1 second. We can see how successful it's been, and you can see that these deaths have dropped from more than 200 a few years ago to just 3. And I don't mean to minimize the 3 people that were killed, but you can see it's a dramatic decrease, in part because of this fence. Now, I'll just close with this thought and keeping things in mind. Now, in a perfect world, an ideal world, should Palestinians, should Arabs be able to get easily to and from schools, jobs into Israel? Should they be able to travel freely across borders? Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to respond. But I share that view. I share that goal that there should be this free access, movement back and forth. But in an ideal world, shouldn't Israelis also be able to go onto a bus, to go into a pizzeria, to go into a cafe, a restaurant, without the fear of being blown up, without the fear of somebody detonating an explosive vest next to them? So when you put these two things together, you have to make a decision as to which is more important and which takes precedence. And the goal of any government, the Israeli government, was, while the freedom of access is important, protecting Israeli lives is more important. And this fence, this barrier, can come down at any point in time, but you can never replace the lives of Israelis who have been killed in terrorist attacks. And I'll close with just a couple basic facts. First of all, trees have been uprooted to build the fence, but they've also been replanted. Israel's replanted 90,000 olive trees. The Supreme Court of Israel has actually reordered the route of the fence in order to place minimal obstruction to Palestinians wanting to get back and forth. So if we look at it in context, look at how Israel is trying to protect its people, realizing that, yes, it does create some hardships, but they're trying to minimize that. But let's remember even the rocket attacks that Israel's facing today and the daily threat of terrorist attacks that Israelis live with. So thank you, and I'll turn it over.
All right. Given the time constraint, I'm going to dive right into this. I think since we're discussing this from a security perspective, one fact that is worth noting is that the number of Palestinians that have been killed by Israeli atrocities is far greater than the number of Israelis that have been killed by Palestinian attacks. I think since 2000, the statistic is roughly 4 to 1. To touch on a couple of brief human rights reports, for example, the 2005 report of Human Rights Watch points out that the Israeli forces have killed or injured thousands of Palestinians who are not taking part in any hostilities since 2000. Amnesty International's reports from 2005 and 2006 point to the fact that Israel has committed war crimes, crimes against humanity, torture, indiscriminate bombing of residential areas, and deliberate and indiscriminate killing of civilians. And I think the most relevant to our discussion is the latest Amnesty International report of 2007, which points out, I mean, these reports discuss usually the year before, so this is talking about 2006. During a year in which the number of Israelis being killed by Palestinians had diminished by half from the year before, the number of Palestinians killed had increased basically threefold. So in 2006, you had 650 Palestinians killed, including 120 children, compared to only 27 Israelis that were killed during that time. So it's always good to keep in mind that security is a two-way thing. And if Israelis require certain measures, certain security measures to take place in order to ensure their security, then imagine how much more robust security measures the Palestinian would require to basically protect them. But atrocities are atrocities, and this is not really the discussion that we're here to have. I think to talk specifically about why the wall is illegal, why the highest legal body in the world, the International Court of Justice, ruled the wall illegal, why the wall is being condemned by every major human rights organization, and including the United Nations General Assembly, is to understand something more basic about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I have a map up there. The green part that you're looking at is Israel as established in 1948, on 78% of historic Palestine, at the expense of 700,000 people who were driven, indigenous Palestinians who were driven out. But this nevertheless became the legal entity of Israel as recognized by the international community and the United Nations. the parts that you see in red are the occupied territories.